So I just got done watching some of the new trailers for some video games that dropped, and I felt like discussing them somewhere, and where better than this YouTube channel of mine. Plus, when some of these games come out, I'll inevitably be covering some of the lore aspects or just some of the review aspects of some of them because some of them are made by companies I've been following for a really long time. I'm not going to harp too much about Starfield though. I know that's the one that's closest to release, and I'm probably going to end up making a whole little separate video about that. But Starfield was indeed one of the few games, or at least big titles, that were announced that actually had full-on gameplay in its trailer. And it looks more or less like your standard Bethesda post, Skyrim type of stuff, but in space. And maybe they've improved on stuff. Maybe the shooting does look better. But again, I'm not gonna harp too much about Starfield right now. I'm not gonna bag on it. Like I did say, it looks like your standard Bethesda game, but the visuals look really nice. I mean, the visuals in most of their games, in my opinion, are really fucking nice. The creature looks like it shared some similar animations with the Mirelurks of Fallout 4, which again is fine. It's not something I'm going to complain about. Listen, this is a game that I'm definitely going to play when it comes out, just because I've played pretty much every Bethesda game, and I don't know. I'm interested in seeing what they can do with the concept of it being in space. They keep saying it's their first new IP in 25 years, and yeah, that is a pretty big deal. I mean, they bought Fallout, I believe, like 13 years ago, or was it? I don't know, it might have been a little longer now. It might have been like 15 years. But the game looks good. I'm interested in seeing just how many planets and like moons and shit each planet has that we can actually explore. I know they were saying that they took some inspiration from No Man's Sky. But yeah, overall, I'm interested. I think Todd Howard might be up his own ass sometimes, but this one could be a good one. It could be their best game since Oblivion, in my opinion. Who knows? I can't give them credit for New Vegas, as we all know that was Obsidian. We can give Bethesda credit for why it came out so unreleased and buggy, though. That is on them. I mean, they couldn't just extend the deadline for Obsidian. I don't really understand why it was so necessary. But then again, I don't understand how marketing and that whole side of the industry works. So maybe I don't know shit and shouldn't talk about it, Anyway, though, moving on. One of the other games that I feel looks to be quite promising is the game Avowed, and that actually showed a good deal of gameplay. Sure, it doesn't look super polished, really, but it does look like it could be fun. There's like little root powers that remind me of Freya's ability in God of War Ragnarok. Freezing people, shattering them. Yeah, the hand-to-hand melee combat looks a little wonky, but that's kind of what you expect for these type of games. I mean, it is made by Obsidian and not Bethesda. I will say the world looks a lot more surreal than anything we've seen in like the Elder Scrolls games outside of what we see in Oblivion games, of course. This is much more similar in looks to me like the Shivering Isles expansion of Oblivion, which is something I love. Even the dynamic day and night cycle they showed sped up in the trailer looked really cool, just how the sky looks, and honestly the world, like I said, looks really cool. And like I said, the combat, it doesn't need to be that great anyway. It just needs to be, in my opinion, better than Skyrim's, because Skyrim's combat was the best form of Elder Scrolls combat, in my opinion. It definitely upgraded from Oblivion. It is the one place where I definitely put Skyrim above Oblivion. But this needs to be an upgrade of that, and I do realize this is made by Obsidian and not Bethesda, but this is a very Elder Scrolls similar style game, at least how the gameplay looks from what we've seen. But the creatures, the voice acting, all of that, I think, solid. You can never really... What else can you expect from Obsidian? They always do good in that department. I mean, sure, the Outer Worlds, it didn't have the most in-depth story or whatever, but this probably could for all we know. We know that Obsidian can tell a good story when they're given, the proper amount of time. And like I already said, I know there isn't probably a lot of the same writing staff there. I don't really doubt them. I liked Outer World, and I liked some of the side quests a lot. My only hope is that the companions are a little more interesting this time. Not that some of them weren't last time. I just think that's one area that it could be improved on a little bit. I've noticed Obsidian, people will say they tend to work well in other people's universes, but they're the remnants of the company that created Fallout, and they are pretty good at establishing IPs with, an interesting world and interesting characters. I liked the Outer Worlds. I mean, I'm glad that it wasn't a $60 AAA game and it wasn't marketed like that. It was probably the best $40 game at launch that that I've ever bought. It is definitely not perfect, and some of the followers weren't very interesting, but it was a fun ride. Avowed looks like it's going to build off of that. It looks like you're going to have party members. And Obsidian really knows how to handle that type of, thing. They handled KOTOR 2, which had, in my opinion, the better followers, even though there's some in KOTOR 1 that I really like. Although KOTOR 2 has all that fucking missing content. But that's, again, story for another video. They also did New Vegas, which in my opinion also had really good companions. So I'm sure the characters will be likable and fun in this game. And the gameplay, if it's like Outer Worlds, I'll be happy with that. I'm not, expecting them to really build off of that too much. It looks like they are still using the Unreal Engine. And when I play an Obsidian game, I'm not really looking for a super compelling combat. That's what I play like FromSoft games for, or there's other games too, but it just has to be serviceable as long as the story or the characters are interesting enough, or just likable enough, or the world is immersive enough. That's really all I'm caring about when it comes to like an Obsidian game. And they never really try to overreach. That's one thing I appreciate about them. So I'm definitely pretty excited about Avowed. It's probably pretty high on the list, but I'm, not expecting it to be super amazing. I'm just expecting it to be a fun ride to give me a feeling similar to what I had when I first played Oblivion when I was a kid. But yeah, this is a game that I predict will be pretty good. Just don't go into it expecting like New Vegas 2 and you'll be fine. Now the next one I want to talk about is from a franchise that has fallen from grace, but it is still very near and dear to my heart, no matter how bad its third entry, was to me. I'm of course referring to the Fable series. I love Fable 1 and 2. Right up there with like Oblivion and Morrowind and Jade Empire and Dragon Age Origins. All the games I really liked, they're right up there with them. I left out a lot of games, but I didn't want to be here listening for too long. But I really, really, really enjoy the Fable games. At least the first two. The third one I do kind of hate a little bit. I do see what they were going for with it, but, the execution left quite a bit to be desired. And I appreciate them trying to make your brother character in 3 like more than just a one-dimensional villain, but he was still like a tyrant, and he didn't necessarily need to be just because there was like the Night King and the army of dead breathing down his throat. That reminds me of a lot of people's explanation that like in Star Wars, Palpatine was only evil and built Death Stars because he wanted to combat the Yuuzhan Vong. And it's like, well, not really. He just wanted to protect what was his. But anyway, off topic already. This trailer did not really tell us very much, but it had a guy from a movie I really like, The Watch. Now, your mileage on comedies may vary, but this is one I found to be quite funny. It had Ben Stiller, it had Vince Vaughn, and it had this guy from the Fable commercial playing a, spoiler alert, alien in disguise named DeMarcus. Or was it Jamarcus? Again, I'm already getting off subject. But this, it was a pretty cool trailer for a cinematic one. Usually I'm like kind of unimpressed when it comes to the movie trailers that video games will have long before they're released. But yeah, this one I actually quite liked. Maybe it's because that dude is from a movie I like or something, but I thought the concept of him being interested in vegetables while everybody else is just interested in, becoming heroes, or that this is the age of innovation. There's a little hints in what his dialogue was that maybe was, stuff that's going to be found in the game. It just seemed like it could be a very interesting revival of the Fable series, and I heard all the familiar voices and accents that I'm used to hearing from the Fable games. Honestly, as I'm recording this right now, I'm re-downloading Fable 1 and 2 just to replay them, at least at some point in the near future, probably soon. And I really don't think they're going to shit the bag again like they did with Fable 3. Again, I appreciate what they were trying to do with that game, but they failed spectacularly. And one of my friends really loved the multiplayer, but I actually really preferred the multiplayer in Fable 2, so, maybe that's just me. I have a bias towards Fable 2. I really like the guns. So the next entry I'm going to talk about is from Ubisoft, of all companies. Now, I would normally never really even be talking about a game from them. It's not that I hate them, because there has been a good handful of games of theirs that I have liked. For example, I love Black Flag. I love the ship combat. I love the story. I wish it was longer. I liked Assassin's Creed Syndicate, which was pretty good. And when I was a kid, I really wanted to play Assassin's Creed 1 so bad. That was the first game I wanted to play on Xbox. And I was so disappointed by it, but luckily I found Oblivion, and Oblivion let me do everything I thought I was going to do in Assassin's Creed. Even if Assassin's Creed did have cool, kill animations. And I liked, traveling from city to city in that game, the very first one when I played it. Just the overall main story got super repetitive, and normally I'm fine with that, but it just got boring to me after a while. I do appreciate how influential that game has been, you know what I mean? That's pretty cool, it probably paved the way for a lot of historical themed games, I'd imagine. But look, I'm not really that big on that series personally. I did like Far Cry 2 a hell of a lot. I played the shit out of that game when I was a kid. I probably played through it as every playable character, and I think there's 8 of them or something like that. You basically pick a mercenary with a pre-established backstory, and all the other characters become these other NPCs in the game that you can interact with, and they can become your buddies and save you. That game was surprisingly in-depth, so I know Ubisoft can make a good game. They just have gotten lazy lately. Personally, I don't like the Watch Dogs games. That's maybe because I find that premise not really that interesting. I like Deus Ex, or as I like to call it, Deuce Ex, a lot more. Plus, there's this hyper focus on hacking and Watch Dogs. It just seems like They have their idea of like the 90s movie hacker, and that's, if you're into that, that's the game for you. But I've heard that even those are quite boring. And look, I love the Splinter Cell series, but I have not played Conviction or Blacklist, and they appear to have suffered from the Ubisoft formula, as well as just kind of becoming yet another reskin of like Assassin's Creed or Far Cry. Far Cry 3 is fine, Far Cry 4 is fine, don't really have too much of a problem there. They're boring to me. Like, 4 was a little bit more fun than 3 for sure, in my opinion. And I haven't played 5 or 6 or any of the spin-offs. I played a little bit of Primal, which was a pretty good concept. So, like, look, Ubisoft is a mixed bag for me. Like, they do get a bad rap. They made a lot of games I didn't like, which, it's not even that I didn't like them, I just found them uninteresting or like maybe soulless. I'm not to sound like a pretentious fuck, because I don't want to ever come off that way. You know what I mean? But sometimes their games do just feel like they lack depth, entirely. Not always, but so, when I initially saw this trailer, I was worried because I was like, oh, it's just Ubisoft making a flashy trailer, and that's like all there really is to it. But no, there's also some gameplay involved too. So first of all, we'll talk about the cinematic trailer, which I thought looked really good, personally. I thought it had a good, nice feel to it. It got the tone right. It felt and looked like Star Wars. They were playing Sabak. I really liked a lot of the character designs. The aliens looked good. There's a Mon Cala. There was, what are the Greedo ones called? Rhodians. It was definitely a very cool cinematic trailer. One thing I really liked was that we see a slightly damaged Sentinel droid wearing like a trench coat, and he's like presumably one of the main characters or NPCs or allies of the main character. And as soon as I saw him, I was reminded of one of my favorite characters from the Legacy 2 comics, AG-37. Now granted, he wasn't really part of the underworld or anything, he was like a junk trader, but he was a surprisingly friendly killbot who acted as a mentor or almost like a parental figure to the main character, Anya Solo, in that story. Basically because of a debt he owed to Han Solo. He's a really old droid too, that's another thing that I thought was cool. But I'm getting off subject. He just really reminded me of a character I liked, and I always liked the idea of a droid that's now wearing a trench coat in a part of the underworld. That just seems interesting to me. Now it's a cool visual thing. Plus, Sentinel droids are badass. I really liked them in Battlefront, and I haven't really seen them anywhere else, but I played Battlefront 2 a good deal a while back, and they were one of the fun things to play as, so I definitely have a liking for that type of character. But how they handled Star Wars is actually surprisingly well. Like, it looked pretty good for a cutscene. I mean, Ubisoft always makes these extravagant cutscenes. It's not really surprising. Think back to the original Assassin's Creed trailer back when it was announced. Shit, Ubisoft even got Gus Fring to be in one of their games, presumably just to be in the commercials for it. Now, I've always wanted a Star Wars game that focused on like the smugglers and like the underworld aspect of the universe, and we never really get that. I mean, I love Bounty Hunter. I actually got a really long, well, not really super long, but a really big retrospective video for Star Wars Bounty Hunter coming soon. But that's more Bounty Hunter focused, and there's no real piloting involved in that game. You do get to hunt a Jedi, which is pretty cool, but it's mission based. It is a third person shooter, not really that cover based. You have a bunch of gadgets. Fun game, but not the smuggler, scoundrel, underworld adventure I was looking for. Now sure, we get to play as a scoundrel type character in Kyle Katarn with the Dark Forces and Jedi Knight games, but in those games he eventually becomes a Jedi, and that kind of, while he is like a smuggler Jedi hybrid, he is still like a Jedi Master with Force powers. I wanted something where you can play as like a regular guy. And yeah, Shadows of the Empire exists. Dash Rendar, he's pretty cool. He's like 90s Rob Liefeld style Han Solo. Very cool character, but he's just a mercenary who the rebels contract in that game, and the game really hasn't aged the best. It's still fun to me, but they also they're not really what I was looking for. They just happen to be smuggler style characters in these games. We've never gotten a full-on game about an underworld or smuggler type. Like, we just haven't got it, especially one that was open world and had the option of space flight and going to different planets. Yeah, KOTOR had going to different planets, and I guess so did some of the other games, but this one looks like you're actually flying from planet to planet, jumping into hyperspace. Truly the real deal, and maybe Ubisoft can actually pull this off. But I guess, like I always say, we can just wait and see on that. So that being said, there haven't been really very many games set in this universe, and I like that there's like this little like cat dog kind of companion instead of a droid, because Fallen Order has the droid, and I like that they switched it up and gave it a little pet instead of the droid. I also think it's funny that the main character, I don't know her name, but she seems pretty cool. She's like a gambler, a smuggler, a rogue, that type of person. I love those type of characters in Star Wars, and I would really like to play as one in a video game. So She does seem like a little stock, though, and I'm thinking maybe that this might be a Cyberpunk or Mass Effect type of situation, where she's like the canon version of the character, but maybe we get to create our own version. But I'm not saying that's very likely either. I don't think Ubisoft does that very often. That might just be wishful thinking on my part. So I guess I didn't pay that much attention to the showcase, because they did announce that tomorrow, or I guess today now, or the next day, or whenever this is releasing, probably a day or two late, but they announced that they were going to show teaser footage of the gameplay, and they ended up showing like a whole, I believe 40 minutes of it with developer commentary, where they talked about stuff to expect and, just kind of described the gameplay and what's going to be going on and what feel they were trying to go for or whatever. So I might as well talk about the gameplay a little bit, right? I mean, the shooting looks pretty decent in my opinion. It's basically third-person shooter, cover-based. At least that's what it looks like to me. I've seen some people say this looks a bit generic, and while I tend to agree, there's really only so much you can do with third-person shooting. It's like cover-based third-person shooting. As long as it's good and enemies aren't like bullet sponges, that should be fine. They're clearly going for the Grand Theft Auto, Red Dead Redemption sort of feel, so most of the missions probably will revolve around shooting a bunch of enemies. And at the end of the day, all it has to do is be serviceable, and the exploration has to be good. I mean, look, to me, a first-person shooter, by very nature, is sort of generic. It's more that, what they do with that format is how it becomes good, not just because it's, a third-person shooter that's cover-based or a first-person shooter. Doom gives you a fucking grappling hook, which changed the game, and one of my favorite first-person shooters of all time is Metroid Prime. And I always wanted a Star Wars game like that, but the closest we got was Bounty Hunter, which, guess what, was third-person and not first-person. But I'm already getting off subject. This game, this Outlaws game, in many ways feels like some sort of spiritual successor to the infamous canceled Star Wars 1313 game that was originally made to be a sort of exploration, like an open world style video game exploration of the underworld element of Star Wars. A lot of people were very excited for this game, and there was this teaser gameplay demo thing that was released a while back, and they found footage of sort of recently, but it looked really good. And the game mainly was going to let you create your own character until way late into development, George Lucas decided that the game should be a sort of spiritual sequel to Bounty Hunter and should focus on Boba Fett instead of a player-created character. And now I believe that they were still going to leave in the creation element so that you play the first part of the game as your created character, and then Boba Fett captures him, and then you play as him for the rest of the game, or something to that effect. I can't really remember. You'd have to watch a more Star Wars oriented channel to give you the better details of that game, but it definitely was very promising, and a lot of people were bummed out that it got canceled. But it was a Star Wars third-person shooter with a heavy focus on open world elements and of course the criminal underworld. But honestly, this game and the gameplay, it looks pretty fun to me, especially maybe just because it's Star Wars. If this was a different IP made by Ubisoft, it might be maybe less promising. But since it's Star Wars, we've really never had this style Ubisoft open world game set in the Star Wars universe, so that alone, in many ways to me, makes it interesting. The planets we did see parts of looked pretty interesting. I think one of them was supposed to be Kijimi, which was most recently featured, I believe, in the Kenobi series. The planet they're on in the little gameplay trailer, I wasn't really sure where that was. I think it said somewhere in the trailer. But I like how it had the little bar and hub little town area aside from the whole mission area, and she kind of got away and got to that. It was a really cool little sequence. Obviously, all of these gameplay trailers, it's heavily scripted. They're showing probably one of the best missions of the game. I mean, the best example of something like this would be with Cyberpunk 2077. Except, hopefully, these guys don't lie about half their game like CD Projekt Red did. It's like if they couldn't pull all that stuff off, then don't advertise it, you know what I mean? But there's something about getting into a gunfight with a bunch of stormtroopers, or in this case, scoundrels, shooting your way out, hopping on a speeder, getting away, getting to a safe little cantina area, maybe getting into another shootout and having to hop in your starship and escape to another planet. That seems like something that only the Star Wars universe can offer, you know what I mean? And it's not like it's hard. It's something I'm sure even Ubisoft can pull off. So we'll have to wait and see, but the gameplay trailer definitely looked interesting. A lot of this stuff seems really cool and interesting to me, like leaving the atmosphere of a planet in your ship. We don't really ever get to do that in Star Wars that I can think of. Jump into hyperspace, yeah, that's been a thing, in, I believe KOTOR had it. And it happens in dozens of cutscenes in dozens of Star Wars games. But to do it yourself, like No Man's Sky style, that's got to be a lot of fun. Or at the very least, very immersive. I think it's very possible that this gameplay loop in this game could be quite fun. Now, it looks like there's going to be speeder combat and ship combat. Maybe, you hop on your speeder, go back to your ship, drive your ship into space, and maybe run afoul of some kind of space battle. And I heard the developers talking a lot about the wanted system that's supposed to be like Grand Theft Auto. So if you piss off the Imperials and you just keep fighting them, they'll just keep throwing increasingly stronger forces at you until I imagine you're killed or you escape them. A lot of people have said the space combat and the gameplay in that department looks rather simple and not super in-depth, but honestly, that's kind of my preference. I mean, look at how weird the space controls were in Battlefront 2. Like, after a while, you get used to them, and Starfighter Assault is actually playable, but then you can't find anybody to play the fucking game with you. Plus, at the end of the day, I just never really cared for how ships played in Battlefront 2, the EA one. A lot of people will bring up Squadrons, which is a game I have yet to play, but I've seen gameplay of a lot, and some of my friends play it a lot, and it looks really fun, and the gameplay looks really good, especially for ship-to-ship combat. I'm expecting the stuff in this game to be a bit more like No Man's Sky, which the developers have said they've taken a good amount of influence from. All in all, I do think it looks like a very promising game, and despite me constantly bashing on Ubisoft, I probably will buy it as soon as it comes out, like after the initial couple days pass by, and I know whether it's an incomplete mess or not. I mean, look what happened with Jedi Survivor. But it's something I can definitely see myself covering on the channel just because the little kid in me has always wanted to play a game like that. That could be pretty good as long as the game doesn't just feel like a Star Wars reskinning of an Ubisoft game. I do like how her associate Jalen, I think his name is, the guy who's like sitting in the chair and he's like, oh, you want to be rich beyond your wildest dreams. The guy who's like recruiting her for a job or whatever. The dude's dressed just like Kyle Katarn, and I don't know if that's an homage or a reference, but I appreciate it. I love seeing homages to Kyle Katarn since we probably will never see him again in a video game. Unless they decide to start producing content for Legends again, which I don't really see happening. Look what happened with the Knights of the Old Republic remake. Look where that state's at. And look at the Switch port for the KOTOR 2. I mean, look how all that stuff's been being handled. Sure, it's all the same company, but you'd think that they'd get their shit together with a money-printing IP like Star Wars. I don't know, though. Maybe it isn't as easy as it sounds. Look what EA did with the Battlefront games. Yeah, 2 got good over time, but 1, in my opinion, just fucking sucked. Cinematically, visually, it looked awesome, but, I'm getting off topic. But I'm not a fan of the newer Battlefront games that much. I did like the campaign in the new one, although it was kind of buggy, and I like some aspects that they added to the new one, like Ewok Hunt and stuff like that. But I genuinely hate that games nowadays don't give you any achievement for beating it on the hardest difficulty. Now, I know Battlefront 2 wasn't that hard at all, especially on the hardest difficulty. Half the time the enemies were too bugged out to shoot the right direction, which maybe that's a canon thing in Star Wars. But it really annoyed me with God of War Ragnarok. It's like, what's the point of beating it on Give Me God of War without getting a goddamn achievement? I mean, some of those damn Berserker fights were damn near impossible to me, and I still had to just power through them thinking that, maybe it'll be worth it when I beat the game and get the Give Me God of War achievement. But there isn't one. They're making it too easy to 100% games now, in my opinion, but maybe that's for the better, but I'm getting off topic. But I do think that this Star Wars game will be one of the few games that I'm able to put aside my anti-Ubisoft bias and actually judge fairly. Yeah, I'm being a little more optimistic than some people right now about the game, but that could just be because, like I said, I've always wanted to play a game like this, and we won't really know more until, like, next year or middle of next year, so it seems like they're actually giving this game time to be complete, and that's a really good thing. But like I always say, who the fuck knows nowadays, honestly, if they are even doing that. It could come out an incomplete mess too, so, we can only wait and see. That's just where video games are at in 2023. Premise is something I've always wanted, a high style, far from the whole Jedi and Force, which honestly is just tired and boring to me when it comes to Star Wars. Everybody else seems to have a different opinion. I mean, look, how they're handling the other side of Star Wars right now besides the Force, like with The Mandalorian, that isn't too fucking great right now either. I have to, still edit through my 45-minute long rant about Mandalorian Season 3 because I don't want it to be too obnoxious and over-the-top annoying. But yeah, I definitely, Star Wars, as always, is just a hot-button issue, isn't it? But there was one more game I was expecting to hear word of. Every showcase, honestly, for the past 2 years, I've been waiting to hear more about this game. I'm, of course, referring to the game called Little Devil Inside. A fun little game that's supposed to explore, both sides to the whole monster hunting aspect. Like, there's the old rich guy who's, wealthy and retired. He contracts the monster hunter out on these extremely dangerous missions. And it was showing, this contrast between, the wealthy guy and the adventurer who has to live out in the wilds, rough it out on the lands and whatnot. The game had a really unique art style. It kind of was like minimalistic. It almost reminded me a bit of Wind Waker, and then there's like a Cheshire cat in one of the promotional materials. Just a lot of the imagery in this game really made me want to play it. It made me want to see what the fuck was next. And I believe the first word we heard about this was back in like 2020 or 2021, and all we've gotten since is like one or two little clips or a gameplay trailer, a regular cinematic trailer. But then some people took issue with the design of one of the enemies, because of course that's the age we live in. Everybody has to be, oh, but these look like this, so this must be racist and offensive, because I guess some of the enemies, people thought that they looked like blackface stereotype characters or something like that, and it's like, I didn't really see it. I mean, you could kind of fit any puzzle piece anywhere these days and it'll fit with enough people are outraged about it. So I imagine the team behind the game had to go back in and reskin all these enemies. So naturally I thought that that'd be another delay, but not like as long as it's been. We have not really heard hide nor hair from this game in I think about a year. I think the last update was about a year, and it showed some gameplay and it was like, oh, expect this, you know, and they had a release window for like late last year, but then they removed that before it got near it. Anyway, though, I'm just kind of using this as an excuse to rant about this game. This is just something I was really excited for, and it still has not released yet, which is really a bummer to me. I really wanted to make a bunch of videos about it. I thought it was going to be a lot of fun, a really interesting, like, indie, unique game that was going to... I don't know, I like games like that. I loved Outward, you know. A lot of people didn't because it was kind of buggy and maybe sometimes kind of hard, and maybe in some areas even a little unfinished, but I really liked that game. This looked like the complete package, but maybe they were just really good at advertising. I don't know. But I've been ranting long enough. I was originally going to talk about the season or series finale of Barry today. I had a whole video planned, not really written out, but like halfway written out through notes, you know, all that good stuff. And then I saw all this news about all these interesting games I was wondering about for, you know, the past year or so being released, like the Avowed stuff. I've been hearing about Avowed for the past 2 years. I'm like wondering, like, what is it? It seems like Oblivion-like, and now we finally have like an idea of what it is, which is badass. And then there's a Star Wars Smugglers game, which I'm definitely, you know, intrigued by. I'm not like excited for really yet, just definitely interested in if it's once they show us more of it. The Fable stuff really seems interesting. I could probably talk about that for hours, but I want to replay the first two Fable games again because it's been a while, but I'm definitely excited about that. Just that it's making a comeback at all. And I do have a video planned for Starfield. I gotta watch some more gameplay footage before I make my final judgments on it. It's not like they're gonna send me a review copy or any kind of demo or anything like that, because I'm a nobody. I'm a tiny nobody. But I'm also kind of been critical of Bethesda's games in the past, or I've made critical comments. So, you know, it's like if they did listen to some of my videos, they're like, oh, this guy, you know, he hates us. And it's like, no, it's not the case. I don't really hate you guys. I just don't like Skyrim as much as everybody else, I guess. I mean, I liked it a lot when it came out. I never really thought it was better than Oblivion or Morrowind, though. And honestly, you know, I have a whole video about this. Hopefully it'll come out soon. I know I keep saying that, but look, I'll stop getting off subject. I hope you guys have all found this somewhat enjoyable, or at least informative, or at least entertaining. If you liked it, please like it. If you disliked it, please dislike it. And if you like hearing me ramble on about incoherent nonsense, please consider subscribing, because that's what I like to do. I'm just kidding. It's not usually that incoherent, but this one was just sort of a word scramble video for me. Word vomit, mind scramble. You guys know what I mean. But before my mind turns into further mush, let's have our outro so I can inhale some sweet, sweet alchemy fumes. So yeah, without further ado, let's get brewing. So my next Elden Ring video will probably, or at least I want it to be, about Sarosh and the cage lions. Or chain lions. You guys know who I mean. The lions with the blades like fucking nailed to their hands. Or paws, I mean. And if you notice, they got like horns around there. I'm going to get into it in the video. But there isn't very much info on Sarosh, and I definitely have my own theories I'm going to talk about in the video. But if you guys have any ideas on Sarosh, or like what you want to hear about regarding him and all that, or any interesting theories I might not have heard about him, then please let me know in the comments, because there really isn't a whole lot to go on besides just a bunch of my blatant theorizing and the very little source material we have on him. But as always, I hope you guys had a good one. I hope you enjoyed this video, and let me know what you think of these 3 games. Are any of them standing out to you? Did any of you guys watch the Xbox new trailers or whatever? I just kind of looked through which ones seemed interesting to me or which ones I had been anticipating and just watched the new trailers and footage for those. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. We'll have a new fresh lore video out for you tomorrow. I should be able to stand by those words this time because I got a bunch of stuff actually finished and recorded. So yeah, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a good one. See you next time.